One, two, three, four.
Hello, you're listening to the SKYLIT Books podcast series. We are a general interest independent bookstore located in the Los Feliz neighborhood of Los Angeles, California. This year, because of the coronavirus pandemic, we've had to close our store and cancel in-person events. But SKYLIT is your neighborhood bookstore, and we are finding ways to create community even while we're far apart. In the coming weeks, we'll be putting out lots of new audio content to help you discover new books, connect with authors, and check in with your favorite booksellers. To learn more about how you can help keep SKYLIT alive, please visit our website at skylitbooks.com or check out our social media accounts on Twitter and Instagram. You can subscribe to the podcast on Podbean, iTunes, and Spotify. Thank you for listening and enjoy.
Hello, lovely listeners, and welcome to SKYLIT. This is SKYLIT Books Podcast, and I'm your host, Emily. Today, we're welcoming Rebecca Morgan Frank to read from their new book, Oh, You Robot Saints. They'll be in conversation with Catherine Pierce. Before I introduce them, I just want to remind you that SKYLIT Books offers curbside pickup and online ordering on our website, www.skylitbooks.com. Welcome, Rebecca and Catherine. I'm so happy to have you. Rebecca Morgan Frank is the author of Oh, You Robot Saints, out from Carnegie Mellon University Press this month. Her previous collections are The Spokes of Venus, Sometimes We're All Living in a Foreign, and Little Murders Everywhere, a finalist for the Kate Tufts Discovery Award. Her poems have appeared in The New Yorker, American Poetry Review, Plowshares, and the Kenyon Review, Academy of American Poets Poem a Day series, the Slowdown Podcast, and elsewhere. And her collaborations with composers have been performed widely. The recipient of the Poet Society of America's Alice Faye de Castagnoli Award for her next manuscript in progress, Frank has received fellowships from places such as the Mississippi Arts Commission, the Ragdale Foundation, and the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts. She is a co-founder and editor of the online magazine Memorious and teaches in the Graduate Creative Writing Program at Northwestern University School of Professional Studies. She is joined today in conversation with Catherine Pierce. Catherine Pierce is the author of 4 books of poems, most recently Danger Days, published by Saturnalia Books in October 2020. Her other books are The Tornado is the World, The Girls of Peculiar, and Last Famous Words. Pierce's work has appeared in the Best American Poetry, The New York Times, American Poetry Review, The Nation, the Academy of American Poets Poem a Day series, the Southern Review, and elsewhere. An NEA Fellow and 2-time Pushcart Prize winner, she is Professor of English at Mississippi State, where she co-directs the Creative Writing Program. Welcome, you guys.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, welcome. And I believe Rebecca will be now sharing a poem, so let's hear some stuff from her new collection.
Great. Thank you so much, Emily, and thank you, SKYLIT Books, for having us. And thank you, Catherine, for being here in conversation with me. I'm excited for this. So we're going to start by each reading a couple of poems. And so this book, Oh, You Robot Saints, emerged out of my interest in early automata, the earliest robots, over hundreds, even thousands of years, and also moves forward into our contemporary world of robots. So this poem, The Mechanical Eves, that I'm about to read, engages with some of the different women automata and robots that have come to my attention through my research. The Mechanical Eves. Oh, man has made her. Mechanical Eves have been around for thousands of years, fetching your tea, serving you wine. The early female automatons didn't have a mind, were built from the ribs of men's brains, from their longing to be gods and make a life like a woman could. Oh, man has made her. Oh, man has made her, and she is uncanny and infertile, and so she must be destroyed, like when the captain threw Descartes' automaton daughter to sea, or how Edison's prize talking girls are rumored to be buried alive by the thousands. Dig one up and she will say the Lord's Prayer, a nursery rhyme. She won't speak her own mind. Oh, man has made her in his own image for beauty and service. Oh, man has made her a more pliable Eve with no desire of her own. sold her online for XXX99, given her a hollowness of the heart, a phonograph for a heart. When I was thinking about which poems to read, there's books about the old automata, and then there's the robots. And I thought for this conversation, since we're talking a lot, I think about the future of global warming, the future of AI and robots. I'm going to read this poem, which is sort of a listing of some of the robot creatures that are being made around us as we speak in this moment. Not everybody else's bestiary yet. Then came the soft animals, the snake and octopus slinking along. You've seen the octopus as escape artists, sneaking out of cracks and holes, hiding in a teapot, plotting the big adventure. Now she moves through chemical reaction, the first soft robot taking to the sea, while the real thing once disassembled her own aquarium, waiting in a puddle to be found. Now imagine her robot double dismantling at will, that which we tried to contain, swimming off into the deep, re-emerging like the snake that slithers into your garden in trapezoidal kirigami skin. Its cuts keep it crawling through bursts of air. An innocuous slinky in colorful garb, this robot can sidewind anywhere. Now ask why everything now harbors a weapon in your mind. Do you dread the snake under your bed? Is it the real tooth and venom you fear, or this programmed body double here? We're told of a fault built on flesh, the flesh of a fruit, the flesh of a woman. Now this man-made flesh, a reptilian test of applied knowledge, industrial sin. Enter the latest sensation, a cockroach robot sliding through the cracks to get to you, away from you. Extinction has been eradicated, but replacements are on order. Enter Robotanica, the world of the wild robot, woodpecker, dragonfly, kangaroo, child, unborn, they can all do the job. 2 by 2, battery powered to keep the world moving, replacing their organic prototypes, centipedes, spiders, termites, and bees. These are just the beginnings of an evolving robo nation, as if someone has decided to revise, start over, this time using human labor invention. All right, I'm going to pass it over to you, Catherine.
All right. Well, Morgan, I loved hearing those poems. Thank you for reading those. It was also so great to hear them out loud. I'd read them on the page, but I hadn't obviously heard them. And just the sounds of them are so fantastic when you're reading them. So thanks. That was really, really fun to hear. And I love those poems. So yeah, I'm going to read 2 poems from my book, Danger Days, which came out in October. And this is also a poem that deals with the future and the past in certain ways. And so this one is called Inheritance. And I was thinking about the ways that we look ahead of us and look behind us and sometimes don't look far enough ahead. So Inheritance. Dear children, when we were children, the sun pushed against us and we let it. We were not cautious. It didn't push hard. It was only the sun, and it was ours after all. Dear children, when we were children, mosquitoes carried nothing but annoyance. Our Coke cans always lipped with bees. Dear children, in winter, we measured snowdrifts with yardsticks. Sometimes ice glassed every leaf on the rhododendron. Some of us learned to drive stick on slick gray streets. There was that one summer of the heat wave. We remember it because it shifted everything a bit. The pavement blurring, our fathers swearing over the grill. We remember it, is what I'm saying, like you remember anything unusual. Dear children, when we were children, the TV sometimes droned on about ozone and acid rain, and we understood that the future was a country our parents would have to navigate, but had nothing to do with us. We had so many flowers. We had so many polar bears. Our ice shelves were beautifully intact. There were still storms, sometimes terrible, and people died in terrible ways. And we remember how every magazine in the checkout line for a week that one year, and also that other year, was stamped with a hurricane's name, font bold and tragic. We remember, is what I'm saying. And then it was pure summer again, the bee hum loud in the fields. September, like an apple, split open to its crisp, bright heart. We loved it all as children do, roughly and distractedly, and we continued to love it that way, as the field slowly hushed, as snowdrifts hissed and blinked and became banks of memory, gleaming rises of words that we could leave to you. And then I'm just going to read one more. This is a poem called Please Let It Be Aliens. And this one came out of, I was reading a newspaper article and there was a headline. This was in the Washington Post. And the headline was, and this is the epigraph for the poem, "A solar observatory in New Mexico is evacuated for a week and the FBI is investigating. No one will say why." And I read that headline and my first thought was, oh, I really, really hope it's aliens this time. I really, really wanted it to be aliens. And so then I thought it might be interesting to try to unpack that a little and figure out why I really wanted it to be aliens. So that's what this poem is doing. It's called Please Let It Be Aliens. Let it be a silver disc, a foil zeppelin bleeping across the radar, a blot in front of the sun and then gone. Let the word intergalactic be paired at last with espionage. Let uniformed men stride briskly down long corridors. Let astronomers pace and calculate. Let there be phone calls and code words, an envelope unsealed by trembling hands, and let the light become strange, the radio signals scramble, the dogs whine skyward. Let there be a great silver crack down the sky of our surety, and flames and fear born of wonder. Oh, let it be aliens for once, instead of another threat from our own sad sack planet, a call from inside the house twist we all see coming. Let us believe, though it seems impossible, that someone still wants to claim us. Someone still thinks our poison green world worth wanting. So I'll stop there. And I know, Morgan, we have lots to ask each other about.
Yeah, wow. I just want to say how much I'm so glad that you read both of those poems, and particularly Inheritance. I love that line, our parents would have to navigate it. It had nothing to do with us. And I feel like that thread to the book, I related so much as a generation of that, of having this awareness about environmental destruction and global warming through our whole life, but it being sort of passed forward to this future. I feel like both of our books are engaging with that. We're living in this future that we've always sort of imagined, but not really. It was something in sci-fi, it was something in the movies, and all of a sudden, complete without a global pandemic, we're living in it. And so I just love that thread and in the book of looking back at looking forward into what we're living in now.
Yeah, and thank you. And that's one of the things that I love so much about your book too. I think that I just, first of all, the title, Oh You Robot Saints, is just the best title ever. I really, really love that title for a book. So I just wanted to add that. But, when I was reading through your book, I was thinking about how it's so interesting to consider ideas of the future. Like, what does it mean to consider the future? Because yes, we think of the future as, I still think of the future as looking like the Jetsons, right? Even though that at this point, I guess, is the past, I think. But, in terms of when it was supposed to have been set. But when I was reading your book and I was thinking about all these automatons that have been made, centuries before, and how in a way we've always been living in the future, right? But we never sort of acknowledged it as that. And we keep waiting for the future to be this thing full of new possibility. But if we don't make some changes in the present, there's not going to be much of a future. So that was one thing that was really striking me in reading your book, thinking about how people have always been inventing things that seem to be kind of, teleporting us into the future, or, at least sort of mentally doing that, or imaginatively doing that. And I was just really, really struck by that. One of the questions that I had for you, Morgan, that I'd love to hear you talk about is just sort of the genesis of this book, but specifically about the kind of explorations you did to write them. Obviously a lot of research went into these poems, but I think that now, especially since we can't really travel, I just think about travel all the time. And so I was wondering how much of the research that you did for this book involved physical travel? How much of it involved kind of, internet travel, book travel? Did you physically see some of these things that you're talking about? I'd just love to hear you talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, thanks. I I uh, I remember distinctly when this book began, which is that I'm married to a medievalist, and there was a book called Medieval Robots that popped up on the coffee table one day by Ellie Truitt, who's an amazing scholar, and I cracked it open and I couldn't stop reading, and so that began my research through books, and just kept expanding, reading more and more. And then I was really lucky. I was teaching as a poet in residence at Brandeis, and I got a research fellowship to go to London for a summer that they had a robot exhibit at the Science Museum. And it had a few of the objects that I was really interested in seeing. One is the automaton monk that is on the front of the book. You see an X-ray picture thanks to the Smithsonian. And then there were all these other, incredible ones there. And then I also went to see one of my other favorites, and I'm saying all those because those of you who are listening, you can Google this automaton monk from the 16th century. There's a lot online, and you can see videos of him in motion. And another is a silver swan that's at the Bowes Museum in Barnard Castle, which is just the most magical thing, and everyone should look that up and watch it move. So that was sort of the magic of getting to see that. And the swan was one of the few that I got to see in motion. I would say the monk, you could see a video of it. Most of them, it's hard on their mechanisms to be run. So, I also found some at the V&A. So that was the kind of exciting part, to see things, and it expanded my range of thinking what I might write about, just by some discoveries that I found in those exhibits and museums. And then the other thing I would say is through conversations. I mean, this is how a lot of my work moves anyway, but I love hearing scholars and other artists talk about their work. So, conversations, I was just surprised how many people had some little corner about automata in their research, right? Whether they're whatever period they were in. And that was really exciting. People were just passing me books and passing me ideas. And that kind of kept me going on that path. I mean, turning it back to you, did you find yourself researching more about environmental concerns as well for your book?
I did, yeah. A lot of it happened pretty organically. I didn't set out to write a book about climate crisis. I just set out to write, poems that I was interested in writing, which is what I always do. And so, but over time, I've learned to kind of trust my own obsessions, and to trust that eventually, if I just write the poems that I want to write, they'll start to coalesce around some kind of, thematic arc. Not that I think a book of poems necessarily needs to have a thematic arc. I think that there are fantastic books that don't do that at all. But I think that in this case, I was just writing the poems that I wanted to write, and over time began to realize that, wow, a lot of my concerns these days, a lot of my sort of brain space is spent on the earth and climate crisis, and being also, I was writing this book when my kids were both pretty young. I mean, they're still young, but they were very young when I was writing a lot of these poems. And so all those things were kind of coming together, and I was thinking about, I was outside more because I had babies and toddlers to be like trying to stop crying, so we're going to go outside and we're going to look at the leaves. And and also it was a joy to be outside, kind of experiencing nature in this way. But I was also thinking about the destruction of a lot of things. And I live in Mississippi, which, as you know, Morgan, has a lot of extreme weather, and we get a lot of tornadoes there. And so just all of these things kind of came together for me. But so, yeah, I did do some research, but I think that most of the research that I did was kind of poem by poem. There's one poem in this book that came out of another article I read called On the Issue of Lunar Trash. I had not known how much stuff there was on the moon. I kind of thought that there was like some golf balls and a flag. And I had no idea that the list is much, much, much longer than that. And I was shocked when I read this article. And so I had to write a poem about that, kind of cataloging that. So that's not a poem about the destruction of our own planet, but it's about the extension of that destruction, right? Kind of continuing that even out of our own, out of our own atmosphere and somewhere else. We'll just keep taking our garbage other places, because it's sort of interesting to us to do these projects. So yeah, I did do something there.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just thinking that brings me to thinking about sort of what the cost is of invention, because I feel like that comes up in both of our books, right? It's like, what do humans create, and both the wonder of that and the impact of that. Because that's one of the other poems I love in here is the title is Invention, is it? Or it's the one without, that lists, you just think, I love that. Seems like one, maybe, were you researching that, or are you finding this incredible list of when you start to think of all of the crazy, both great and useless things that humans invent?
Right. No, yeah, right. And in that poem, I was kind of trying to think about, wow, okay, what can we claim and what can we not claim, right? So we can say that, yes, we invented A-line skirts, and we invented the idea of, ham with pineapple on it. Like, yes, we invented those ideas, right? But we didn't invent grief, and we didn't invent, what's in this poem? We invented Friday and June and All Hallows Eve, but we did not invent love or regret or stingrays, right? So we can only take so much credit for things as humans. And right, what do we spend our energy on? Which is another thing that's so fascinating about your book. And you think about all the tremendous effort that went into the creation of all of these automata that you're talking about there, in order to mirror, organic life, and to do it as closely as possible. And I found that so moving, and sort of sometimes funny and sometimes tragic and sometimes just really beautiful. I did look up the swan, which is just, you're right, that is just the most magical thing. I watched that video like 5 times. I just kept watching it move because it's amazing. It's amazing. And so I think that's another thing, is like, when we invent things like that, sometimes we're inventing them for some sort of larger purpose, and sometimes we're inventing them for delight, right? And just for sort of the magic of that. And I think that's something that is so that I'm just really drawn to in any kind of art, and just in thinking about inventions in general. I wanted to ask you a question, thinking about another kind of creature, about the robo bee, which is one of your, you have this remarkable poem called Ode to the Robo Bee in this book. And obviously I'd like to know more about the robo bee, but also I'd love to know about your process for writing this poem, because this poem it's formally really amazing. And, the content of it is really amazing. It interweaves these things. It's a crown of sonnets. It both commits to and subverts the form. It's a meditation on the invention of the robo bee. It's a meditation on the speaker's own body. It's all of these things kind of working together. And it's such a beautiful and complicated poem. And I just love to hear a little bit about how you kind of came to that poem, or how you approached it, and how you decided on using that form in that particular way.
Yeah, thanks so much. I was in a friend's dining room telling her that I had just started reading about robo bees, and poets, we like to write about bees. And she looked at me and she said, "My neighbor is a roboticist at Harvard who's working on the robo bees. Let me introduce you." And he and his family kindly had me to dinner, and and I started to watch all the things online, and this conversation with him. And what struck me was, because this is really the only creator I got to speak to in this process, beyond through their writing, was that it is this pursuit of, I'm thinking about when you talked about the silver swan. One of the guys who created that, Merlin, is also the guy who created the roller skates. So there's people who are just incredibly inventive, but also in a lot of the cases, there are people who they want to solve the problem. They want to solve the problem, but beneath that problem is sort of the magic. Like, how can we fly? When you think about what engineers do, like it's incredible. So how do we make a bee fly? How do you make it join in a colony? And just starting to think the way that, scientists are asking questions like we are as poets. So at first I thought that I was going to be more focused on that process. And what I realized was I couldn't separate out how inventions that we seek out through curiosity or through, for whatever process that we want, we don't necessarily know what their outcome is going to be. And also, at the same time, as you said, I thought I'm going to try my hand at a crown of sonnets. Wouldn't it be sort of funny somehow to me to do a Robo Bee sonnet sequence? And it really went in a direction that I didn't expect, and as you talked about, it's just how this kind of circled back to both war and weapons, and also the female body, going in to the doctor and finding out that, they use what they call robots, like a robot arm to remove things from your body. And all of this sort of came together for me in that poem. I didn't have an intention beyond wanting it to be a sonnet sequence. I don't think I expected that it would be as loose as it was, and it just kind of kept moving. And that I finished that poem. A bulk of that poem was written at a residency at Ragdale, where I was just closed up in a tiny room, listening to the voice in my head over and over. And it was one of those things that was sort of mysterious to me, how it unfolded. So both from the information I gathered and, just circling back to what you said about just writing the poems that you want to write, that for me, the research it's just a place to keep me going. And then it's eventually going to take me back to what I need to write about. Right. So, and I think that comes up in mothers come up in both of our books in different ways. So for me, my unsuccessful pursuit of being a mother, biologically or through adoption, through writing while parenting and considering the future of your children, and that those things in our everyday lives, or for me, being a child of a mother who dies, that right as I was writing the book, that seeps into the poems, even if we but this seems to me true to life. Like we both have our day-to-day life of what's around happening to us personally, and then the world that we're in, where these crazy things are unfolding environmentally or scientifically. So yeah, just circling back in terms of form, it was a little bit of a mystery to me how it came together. But I think it was a lot of things that I'd been thinking about just kind of came to a head and pushed their way into the poem.
You were saying that, you didn't know how loose it was going to end up being. And it's such a great usage of the form, because it's a playful, it reads to me like a playful use of the form, which sort of brings to mind like the bee and the invention of the Robo Bee and all these things that are both serious and also very playful. But I really like the way that the structure of that kind of ties everything together, with the crown of sonnets, where the last line of one becomes the first line of the next, and it becomes this sort of this loose transition, right? So it's a way to kind of fold these ideas together without it ever feeling forced, without it ever feeling artificial. And I think what you were saying is exactly right. Just the way that, this is how we live our lives in the world, right? We deal with our day-to-day lives. We deal with everything going on just beyond our day-to-day lives. We deal with all the stuff that we're reading and carrying and thinking about constantly. And so I really love the whole book, but I think that poem is such a fantastic kind of centerpiece poem for it. It seems to hinge so much of what that book is thinking about and is considering. And so I just really admire it. So thank you for talking about it. That was really, really interesting to hear about.
Thank you so much. I'm grateful. You take a kind of a risk with a poem like that. It's really nice to hear that. I'm thinking about the way that we create sort of the forms that we need or modes. And you have a series of poems in here from the Compendium of Romantic Words, and it's a Howl, Whip Smart, Delicatessen, Undone are some of the subjects there. And can you talk a little bit about that series of poems, because there's so much fun, and also they have their own sort of formal structure to them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for asking about those. There used to be a few more of them that didn't make the cut. And I considered not even putting the series into the book at all, because as I was working on the book, it started to take shape and it started to have it started to coalesce, in a certain direction and become more about climate and parenting and current political, situations and all of that. And these 4 poems from the Compendium of Romantic Words felt a little bit outside of that. But I ultimately kept them in the book because I really enjoyed writing them, and they get at another really important subject matter for me, which is just the pleasure of language, which is something that I think, even though my poems are not usually directly about that, I hope that that's something that's kind of coming through in my poems, because I love words so much, right? And so, I mean, as I think all poets do. And so these poems, which, for anybody listening, when you look at them on the page, they look sort of like little blocks of text almost. They're not prose poems, but they're sort of sonnet shaped, but they're not sonnets. They're a little longer than a sonnet. But yeah, they function as definitions, right? But definitions for how a word might be able to do something beyond what we think that it might do. And specifically, I was thinking about words that I genuinely find romantic somehow, whatever that means, words that might carry some kind of extra weight to them. So those poems were a ton of fun to write because I was able to do a lot of language play and to think a lot about etymology when I was writing these. And I did do a lot of research for these poems too, thinking about, okay, well, where did this come from? And what else can it mean? And how else could I use this particular word? And what's the connotation of this word versus sort of an archaic meaning of this word? And so it was really, really fun to kind of dive into those. So while I think they do feel a little bit outside of the other poems in the book, I decided just to leave them in there because I really enjoyed writing them, and I hoped they would add a little texture to the book. So I'm glad to hear you say that they resonated for you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I like that idea of texture. If there's any listeners who are poets who are building books, we all know that's kind of a mysterious project. But I find more and more, and you and I both worked with graduate students on shaping a lot of books. And I think you learn so much about shaping your own book by reading a lot of manuscripts by other people, which we do in different roles, whether it's as teachers or as friends or as editors. And I love that idea of texture, right? That I think, in a book maybe has some cohesive principles, the sort of opening that up and expanding it, making space for that is really a key to so many books. I think that adhering to something too tightly can feel restrictive, both for your writing and for the reader, right? To have some sort of relief, like if we just have, robots and climate change doom coming at us every poem, this is certainly not the way that these poems move through this.
Yes.
Yeah, I wonder too, if you could talk about your writing process a little. I think that's sometimes just interesting to hear what other people's process is.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I'm going to turn that one back to you because I would like to hear more about yours also. I think that my writing process it's always kind of in flux depending on what I'm working on and kind of what else is happening in my life. And that itself is part of the process for me. And I've learned to be more accepting of that the longer I've been writing. I think for a long time, I was trying to kind of follow that dictum of, oh, well, you should write every day for X amount of time. And, that never really worked for me. I'd have other stuff I had to do, or my brain couldn't be on poems when I knew I had to be taking care of this other project, and I would always just do better when I could have a little time, sort of to set aside. And so eventually I got much more comfortable with that. And I also started to recognize that I think it can be a gendered idea, right? Or an idea that sort of is wrapped up in privilege and in patriarchy, and this idea of, clear out 2 hours every day to write. Well, I mean, sure, maybe that sounds lovely, but not everyone is able to do that. And that's okay too. And I mean, if you can and it works for you, I think that's fantastic. And I think if you can and it doesn't work for you, that's also okay. And if you can't and you want to do something else, like every approach is fine. So for me, I try to clear out some time when I don't have to do anything else. So it can't be when I know in half an hour I have to get back to the student poems that I'm commenting on. I'd rather wake up early and have 2 hours before anybody else in my family is up, or, sort of clear out a Friday afternoon when I've done everything else and just really kind of dive in for a while. And for me, it often starts with reading, just reading stuff that I like and following my obsessions. And I like writing series too. It's always a good track for me to run on, which is what happened with the compendium poems too. So that helps me when I'm stuck. But yeah, reading and just giving myself that time and space, however I can find it, to just play with language and to accept that I may not produce something every time, right? I may just get some notes down or write around something, but giving myself that freedom is really useful for me too. So, but that's one answer. What about you though, Morgan? How does your process work?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we're all kind of reframing our creative practices during the pandemic, right? As based on our different situations. My ideal situation was when I was teaching in Mississippi at the University of Southern Mississippi. I had a windowless library carol where I went every Friday, and I love that, just sort of the blank room where no one can get to you. But in the end, you have to be adaptable, and I always kind of lecture everyone else: pay yourself first, right? If you can, if there's tasks you will do, like you have to grade or you have to answer emails, do the thing that you think might be pushed aside, because if you're a responsible person, you're still going to do those other things. So I've been, try to put that in place to make space for that before everything else, like that it deserves to be a priority and is essential in that way. And I think that's just a good reminder to all of us in the pandemic too. Like this is essential too, as much as you can make it be, depending on what your circumstances are. There's certainly things that have to be done, but some things maybe you can take an hour for a poem first.
Yes, no, absolutely. And I think that's still something that I try to remind myself of, every day. And so I'm glad to hear you say it again, because it's absolutely right. And I think that is, yes, it matters. It matters as much and probably more than some other things, I mean, the work matters. And so, yeah, absolutely. To be able to prioritize that in whatever way you can, right? In whatever way you're able to do it on balance with the other things that you need to be doing, but still making time and brain space for this, which is also just a hugely important part of our lives and who we are.
And I'll just add, as we wrap up, I think conversations with other poets. So this one is being recorded, but I know that all of us are spending time on Zoom, connecting to poet friends, talking about our work or what we're reading, or even about other things, but knowing just that sort of solidarity of having a community of poets to remind us this is what we do in the world, even if we aren't gathering in person, to share our work through reading, etc.
And it helps so much. I mean, right, that connection and getting to talk to people. And yeah, I mean, I'm so glad I know it was recorded, but it was so great to talk to you and just hear your thoughts on your book. And it makes me want to go write now. So, it was really, really wonderful to hear about that. And congratulations on Oh You Robot Saints, which is just a fantastic, fantastic book. And I'm so excited. It's going to be out in the world very, very, very soon. What's the actual release date for it?
It is February 19th.
Okay, so
which was exciting. And yes, thank you for talking. Danger Day is terrific. As you know, I've been a longtime fan of your work. And this is one of my favorite books of yours. I just think it's terrific, and I hope readers will find their way to it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing your work with us, Rebecca Morgan Frank and Catherine Pierce. Thank you both for your thoughtful questions. It was really such a lovely discussion. And yeah, again, today's guests were Rebecca Morgan Frank and Catherine Pierce, and they were discussing both of their new collections, Rebecca Morgan Frank's Oh You Robot Saints and Catherine Pierce's Dangerous Days. You can order copies at skylitbooks.com. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you for listening to the SKYLIT Books podcast series. Please don't forget to visit our website at skylitbooks.com and make sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast for more author talks and bookseller conversations. You can find us on Podbean, iTunes, and Spotify. Stay safe and healthy, and we hope to see you back in our store soon.